The second storm is over, but tens of thousands of people still without power. Some of them, they've been in the dark since the first one hit last Friday. And they're demanding electricity and demanding answers. Then we will check in a bizarre day at the Percoco corruption trial with the jury in disarray, but now they're finally back to deliberating, hoping to resolve the case. Also, finally, some movement when it comes to gun control, but it did not happen in our nation's capital, or for that matter, the state of New York. Florida, believe it or not, ahead of the curve on a bunch of measures. We'll take a look on just how significant that is. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to RFL. I'm Richard French. Thank you so much for joining us this Thursday evening. Well, people, they're digging out today after the second nor'easter to slam our area in the past week. The big story, though, it remains power outages and the growing anger at Con Edison and other power companies. Let's first take a look at the numbers. Across our area, more than 250,000 homes in the dark. In the Hudson Valley, more than 70,000 without power, more than 6,000 of those homes in Westchester, Con Ed customers who've been in the dark since the first storm. Now, across the river in New Jersey, more than 200,000 homes without power. New Jersey, PSEG, and JCP&L, big numbers, both of them. JCP&L, more than 100,000 as we speak. Things, they are better on Long Island, where about 14,000 are without service. Now, we have been getting a huge amount of reaction from viewers who are venting anger, and I argue deserved, at Con Ed in particular. I'm going to read a few of the 100 of tweets that have been flooded into our message boards. Bill says, Con Edison, just a reminder, tweet, that no one appreciates your lack of information, canned answers, false information, and inept planning. When the dust settles, I hope you take the time to make necessary changes and provide fair compensation to all affected. Start by firing management. Peggy tweets, Con Edison, what's wrong with you? Get your crews to work on these that have been out for 7 days already. Total incompetence. Don't you prepare for storms ahead of them? You expect us to pay your crazy bills now too? Scott says, for my birthday, I'd like Con Edison to just restore my power. It's only been a full week. And on this program yesterday, I spoke with a Con Ed spokesperson, and I gave him an opportunity to respond to the vast amount of criticism out there. You guys don't feel that you've done anything wrong up to this point? You've done the best you really can do?
You know, all those words like contrition and doing the best we can, they come after we get everybody back up. We remain focused on the recovery and the restoration from what is now 2 successive storms back to back. After we get everybody back, we can talk about contrition and moving ahead and new methods.
I'll give you free advice. That's not what customers want to hear right now, that we're doing everything we can and people shouldn't expect more. Frankly, they are right now, and they're not getting it. Now, Westchester County Exec George Latimer is one of many local leaders who are livid with Con Ed, and not just Con Ed, but primarily Con Ed. Now, he wants top leadership to be fired. He even called Con Ed here to say just as much to them. Yesterday, we had our cameras rolling when he let him have it.
We're done. I'm going to call together the elected officials of these communities. We're going to call for resignations of senior management. We're all tired of these excuses. There are human beings out there. We're giving statistics instead of real-world services.
Governor Cuomo, he's also TO'd. Yesterday, he called for an investigation into the power companies. Today, he reiterated his concerns during a conference call with the media.
I'm fully aware of it. I understand the frustration. I understand the anger. You know that I've spoken to the PSC every day for the past 3 days, that I've ordered a review. I've ordered that if the review shows negligence or lack of diligence, the most severe sanctions should be levied.
Now, across the river in New Jersey, Governor Phil Murphy, he's also unhappy. Yesterday, he joined me on my program, and he described his frustration.
I don't blame folks for being outraged and frustrated and angry as heck. I do believe that they have prioritized, I don't want to speak for them, but they've prioritized the folks that were already out above the line to be first in line to get back on. But it is quite clear that there was a flat-footed response to this.
And he reiterated that frustration today.
We're going to examine what went wrong and whether the improvements to protect and strengthen our grid devised post-Sandy have been implemented. We will look to see if all preparedness measures were taken before last Friday, knowing a major event was coming. My gut tells me they weren't. And if they've not been, this is entirely inexcusable.
All right, I want to bring in our panel right now, and what I want to know is where should the buck stop? Richard Brodsky joins us, a former Democratic New York State Assemblyman from Westchester, also professor at NYU. Conservative strategist Bill O'Reilly joins us, and our senior political correspondent, Andrew Whitman. Listen, I got to tell you, everybody kind of followed the playbook here. It's easier to go after the utility companies when something like this happens, but Con Ed made it really easy. The CEO, literally, I mean, this may be a little inside baseball for you. We had been trying to get statements. There's 7 or 8 utility companies that have been involved in one way, shape, or form with outages since the storms, going back to the first one. Only one of them was reticent to answer any questions for us repeatedly, and that was Con Ed. We literally went to their offices in New York City. They wouldn't even come downstairs until we threatened to go live in front of their building to at least get some answers as to what was going on. Finally, they did so. Finally, the CEO came out the day before the big storm. He said there was no mistakes that he could point to. He said, really, they're doing everything they can and should be able to do. Didn't say there was manpower issues or whatever else. Now, I take you back 5 years ago, Richard. After Sandy, everybody said, wait a minute. One of the biggest problems that happened here, beyond the lack of preparation, was the absence of transparency. People want to know when realistically they're going to get the power on. It's better to tell them the truth than to string them along and give them false hope. So then we saw that, and they said, okay, we're going to have a big plan here, and in 4 years we'll have this all in place. Well, 5 years after they started doing that report and they had supposedly enacted all those changes, we didn't have Sandy with the nor'easter, the first one, or what we saw yesterday, and what we have seen after it. Trust me, I go through these tweets. That's a fraction of the stuff that I can even put on TV, how livid they are.
You feel for the people who are suffering. It's a tough thing to happen. It's hard to know if they were prepared or not prepared. That will come.
Wait. That's not fair, though, before you move on. We do know that they asked late in the game compared to other utilities for mutual aid, first off. Second of all, they did not have a response mechanism to customers, period, that gave them any clarity.
Wait a minute. That was the third thing. But the third thing is Con Ed has a historic ineptness of cosmic proportions in their inability to talk to people and have themselves believed and have people rely on it. If you tell someone whose power is out, look, you're out for 4 days, but I'll have it on in 4 days. People are much more accepting.
I agree.
Where it's like a delay on the subway system.
Don't say you'll be there at noon, though, and 3 days later you show up.
Con Ed's inability to get a message out to its constituency is unbelievable. The elected officials, God bless them, I used to be one of them. It's always easy to do. The governor's wrong about negligence. If it's only negligence, you can't punish Con Ed. There's got to be something more than that. And more importantly, it was his Moreland Act commission that was supposed to lay out what all the fixes were.
Well, I want to get to where that buck stops. But, Bill, you also bring the perspective of county government here. At the end of the day, mayors or even the county exec, can they really do anything here? Or can they just say, please, would you please talk to these people and let them know what's going on? Would you open up your phone lines here? Will you give them realistic timelines? Can you just basically plead with them, or can you really do anything?
Do you know what they can do? They can find out who needs services, where there's seniors that might need help, and go and try and serve them rather than calling on the heads of these utilities to get fired in the middle of a crisis.
Your old boss did the same thing after Sandy. And he was crazy
I
mad,
couldn't care less.
justifiably.
With all due respect to George Latimer, this is not campaign time. I'm not looking to fight with him. But the dog gets kicked every single time. These guys, and also, I mean, I've had power out in the past for a week at a time, 10 days. I've been through it. We've thrown $1,000 worth of stuff out of freezers that people go through. It's awful. It's awful for seniors. They're suffering. I get it. but they're doing the best they can.
Oh, he's an apologist.
They're doing the best they
You
can.
don't know that. You don't know that any more than.
Let me tell you, I have guys in my neighborhood working 24 hours
No,
a
but
day.
here's
shifts.
what I've gotten, Bill. Okay, and again, you guys have some
They can
experience with
communicate
this.
better.
The guys out on the literally, they're doing everything they can. They're not goofing off. And I've heard that. This goes to New Jersey. This goes to the Hudson Valley. This goes to the southern Hudson Valley here, Long Island, really more on the flooding side with some of the wind issues. But nonetheless, I've heard very few criticisms about the line guys. What they're telling our people on the ground is the direction from management, where to go, what to message, is beyond incompetent. And they're saying there's no experience in the management level as to what's going out on the field, so they're giving the worst kind of directions. And moreover, Andrew, this is what really has tweaked me. We've had people report to us numerous times, so this isn't some one-off, that they have an outage. The only place they can go, because they can't get a human being on the phone, they go online, and they see online that their case has now been power restored. They're like, what are you talking about? They call and say, my power has not been restored. They then go out. It happens a second time. They then say, what are you talking about? I've never even seen a guy. How can you tell me my power has been restored? And then a third time. I believe, playing on the term with Con Ed, that there's a con game going on here to a certain degree here. It's not just oops. I think they're playing with some of the numbers as to how bad the problem is.
Clearly there's communication problems, both in terms of communicating to the customers when their power they think will be restored, but also hearing from their customers as to whether the power's on or not. I mean, I can't imagine anything more frustrating than looking on the website and seeing, oh, I've got power, and you're sitting there in the dark. And you would think that Con Ed would figure out a way, and other utilities, to be more responsive to the whole thing. That's one of the issues that came up with the Moreland Act 5 years ago and does not appear to have been resolved. The mutual aid that you talked about, the Moreland Act called for less reliance on that mutual aid, and it certainly doesn't seem like that's the case. I just can't, I find it hard to accept that in 2018, you're taking this long off the first storm. Forget about what happened with the snow coming yesterday to at least get a better sense. One of the things that
There's still weather in 2018,
one of the things,
just like there was in 1918 and 1718.
There wasn't after the first storm. I mean, everything was clear.
You had
and
two
there were
monster storms
5 days.
hit.
Bill, I will tell you only this. To Andrew's point, there were other utilities that didn't have the same dysfunction that Con Ed did. Okay, now JCP&L, they got their problems in Jersey.
They can communicate better.
But it's more than communicate. The rollout and being prepped for a storm that we and the meteorologists were saying 4 days in advance what was going to happen. They actually got this one right, the first one. Okay, my point is, they can't plead. Oh, well, what do you want from us? I mean, big storm. That's their job, right?
I think they're doing the best they can in a bad situation.
You don't know that, Bill, and it's as unfair to the citizens to presume that they are doing as much as they should be as it is to say I've concluded that
All
they're
right,
not.
so Rich, here's the dirty.
PSC.
You and me, a year ago, a year from now, the four of us sit at this table. If the same fiasco happens again, and I said this to George, and I said this to the governor, I go, you guys are new guys, okay? This is the first big storm you've got to deal with. They both came in after the November elections. Am I still getting mad at the utility, or shouldn't I get mad at you guys? Because now, where does the buck stop? Do I keep blaming the utility, or can I?
Service Commission.
How about public servants?
But same thing, which is an arm of the state government and has the statutory power to investigate and remedy. If it turns out that Bill's wrong, then they should be in there quick and hard. If it turns out they're not, they've got to do something at least about the information flow.
I agree with you. Everything you said, Richard. I did hear the same thing 5 years ago. And we had the Moreland Commission. We had everything that was attached to it. And then we see what happened this time. And my worry is, what if we really have a really big one, right? I mean, it was bad, and I feel for people 7 days later here still waiting for the lights to come on. But it could have been even worse. And we're still this bad? Anyway. Coming up next, another day at the Prococo corruption trial here, and another day where things get even more bizarre in the jury room. We'll look at whether or not they're getting any closer to a verdict or a mistrial.